Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hi friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to catch up with Shannon Worthington, president of Dixie Construction Products based in Atlanta, Georgia. Shannon and I go way back. He and I have served on industry boards together, taught classes together, and just enjoyed growing up in the contractor supply business together. Shannon is one of the most focused people I've ever met. He is driven to succeed, but makes sure that everyone is coming along for the ride. Getting ahead doesn't have to be at the cost of others. This is what leadership should look like. I hope you enjoy our conversation. This episode is brought to you by HMI Performance Incentives. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've been exposed to some form of loyalty point system. What a lot of people don't understand is that these programs are not just for the big kids targeting consumers. Loyalty incentive programs are used by small to mid-sized organizations focusing on the B2B market each and every day. From service contractors to stylists, plant engineers to purchasing agents, incentive systems work. You can learn more about HMI performance incentives at www.hmiaward.com or connect with them on LinkedIn at HMI Performance Incentives. Be sure to let them know you heard about them from me, Jason Bader, on the Distribution Talk podcast. Hey, Shannon, welcome to Distribution Talk. Always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you, Jason. How are things up there? A little hot?
A little hot right now. Yeah, a little toasty. I mean, look, you all are built for this, man. This is something that happens to you all every year. We do not get into triple digits very often, and people don't know what to do with themselves right now. I mean, you know, I expect streakers to be running down the streets here pretty soon here. So.
Occasionally we have it here too. So
yeah, I know. I do love your part of the country as well. So one of the things I like to jump into with Distribution Talk is highlighting how you got into distribution. You know, did you get dragged in? Did you answer an ad? How did that happen?
Funny story. So I went to University of Southern Mississippi, and from school there, I went to work, interviewed on campus with Amical Oil Company. And, you know, it was a good opportunity. And then at the time, it was the only job I got an offer from. So I took it and moved to Lake Charles, Louisiana, and actually worked in the production side of the business. So our responsibility is getting the oil out of the ground to the front of the refinery. So did that for about 2.5 years. And about 83, 84, United States had a so-called oil crisis where gas actually jumped to about 79 cents a gallon. And everybody was freaking out. So that was after being with Amoco about 2.5 years. So I was one of the last 6 people they hired. So they came to the 6, called us in and individually told us, hey, look, we're going to probably have some layoffs. It may not be you, may not be any of you, but if you want to go, we'll give you this little pile of money and you can go on, or you can stay and see what happens. So I took the pile of money and moved to Atlanta, started looking for a job. I thought I wanted to be a salesman for IBM at the time. Remember, that was a long time ago. So,
for sure.
When I got to Atlanta, the economy wasn't great. So I had to start looking for other things and answered a small ad in the paper. At the time, it was a company called Automatic Fasteners. Went and talked to him. He says, okay, I'll hire you. And first week I came to work, after 2 days of standing in the warehouse and him pointing things out, threw my keys, a map of Atlanta, put a nail on it, says, that's your quarter. Go sell everything in that van. So that was how I got in this business.
You know, it's funny, Shannon. I mean, I've had that situation. I remember when I was in college, you know, working for the family biz, I went up to Seattle. I thought, I've had enough of Portland, so I'm going to go up and take a look at Seattle, you know, pretty good size city. And I kind of got the same treatment. I was thrown a Thomas guide and a set of keys and said, okay, kid, deliver. And I'm thinking, okay, here we go. So game on.
That's right.
So,
and you know, that kind of steered me toward, I said, if I ever get in a position where I could make a difference, I would never send someone out without any training, without any knowledge to go call on people. Because I think I rode by my first job site 3 times before I got the courage to stop. And, you know, once you get past that, hunger will drive you to do a lot of things.
Sure it will. It will. So how long were you with that company until
About 2.5 years.
okay. Okay.
Then went to work for Dixie because they told me that they'd hire everything I sold and collect the money. So I figured with that much more time, I could sell that much more stuff. And I was the fourth
Mhm.
outside salesman they hired at the time.
Gotcha. Yeah, so the previous job you had to sell, package, deliver the whole shoot and match.
That's correct.
Yeah, yeah. And then it's got to be a breath of fresh air. I mean, I've seen this a lot over the years where I've had companies that still make their salespeople deliver. And I'm like, man, that's too expensive.
You bet it is. And if you train and put your money in the people and support them, it
Yeah.
costs you too much money for them to just be delivery drivers. I'll tell you that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And you think about, it's already hard enough to get appointments, and to be able as an outside salesperson, it's tough enough to get maybe 8 to 10 calls a day, if you really stack it right and do it properly. But if you add, throwing deliveries in there too, you
Oh,
just cut that in half.
that's right. And that's why it was an easy decision for me.
For
So,
sure. Yeah,
you
for
know,
sure.
and I remember going, you're gonna do what?
You mean I don't have to enter my own orders? I don't have
You're
to
right.
I don't have to collect the money? Are you kidding me? Yeah, I'm in, man. Just I don't care whatever it is, I'm in,
That's it.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. I mean, it's so bad. I remember one company I worked with. They had a lot of this. All the salespeople had pickup trucks, and they were delivering pumps and all this kind of stuff. And I was making a presentation in front of the company. I said, you know what? Y'all get Priuses. That's it. We're not delivering anything anymore. Everybody's driving. Everybody's driving Priuses. I've had it. I just shook my head. Again, it's just too darn expensive. So
It is. That's right.
so you sold for Dixie for a long time, and then how did you get wrangled into a management position? Then, I mean,
Well, quite honestly, I worked for Dixie for about 4 years, and there's a lot of turmoil sometimes in a family business.
oh
And
yeah, oh
there
yeah,
was certainly some things going on there that, I'm looking at. And it's a small company. You only have so many slots.
right.
I felt I couldn't learn from the person I had to answer to anymore, and I became stagnant. Not in sales. I sold more than everybody there for 4 years in a row. And that's, again, hunger will drive you to do that.
Sure it will. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So I got an opportunity and left Dixie for a short time to go set up basically an outside sales organization for another company.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I went and did that, and everything was going good, except when it came to the owners that I was working for to invest back in the money so that we could continue to grow and back in the people, they
Mhm.
didn't want to do that. And if you're not going to invest in your people, which is your most valuable resource, well, other than take the money, there's nothing left. So I saw that and realized it. And at the time, my wife didn't like it very much, but I said, hey, we were in Jacksonville, Florida. I said, I'm quitting this gig and we're going back to Atlanta. I'm going to find another job.
Mhm. Mhm.
And which I did, but out of courtesy, I left on great terms at the time, Dixie.
Mhm.
And out of respect for the company and Chuck and Frank, I called them and said, look, you don't have to hire me. I'm not asking to be hired, but I want you to know I'm coming back to Atlanta and I'm going to be looking for a job.
Mhm.
So hung the phone up. Then Frank called me back about 2 days later and says, hey, let's meet and talk about this. And so I did.
Yeah.
And at the time, they hired me to call on the utility business.
Okay.
So different time, the utilities weren't so centralized. So I called on the utility business in the whole Southeast for
Mhm.
about 2.5 years. And then at that time, the salesman that was there left. And then Frank Isaacs asked me if I wanted the opportunity. And I said, well, of course.
Mhm.
So that's how I got in management.
There you go. All right. Well, good. So, was it frustrating? I mean, a lot of guys, when they make that transition from the freedom of the truck, the vehicle, to hey, I got to be responsible now for a few people. How
Well,
did that transition go for you?
certainly it was learning. Frank was a good teacher, as was Chuck when it came to advice. Nobody ever over managed you. Well, what do you expect out of them? You set those expectations, and then you pretty much know where you can do and what you can do after that, or you should. So probably the toughest part was being patient long enough where the people you have working for you can get to where they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And again, when it was just me, I knew what I had to do to go make more money.
Sure.
Well, it wasn't about me anymore. It's about everybody working under me and supporting them and getting them all to produce. And that's how I made more money. So that was one aspect, but I always enjoyed and still do the teaching part and trying to help people.
You know, it's interesting, Shannon. A lot of people try to go to school for that. You know, a lot of people try to get a whole bunch of training and education for that. But I think sometimes you either can teach or you can't teach. You know,
You're absolutely right. And it's a gift if you can. I'm not saying I'm gifted, but I've been lucky enough to be around enough people to learn from them, you know, not just what to do, but what I wouldn't do if I was in the situation. Both ways are very important.
A lot of education comes from banging your head on things, you know. Yeah, I mean,
that's right.
yeah. You know, I've definitely learned some of my best lessons that way. And how big was the sales force, by the way, about this time?
Well, when I took over, it was 6.
Okay.
And now we have 9 outside.
Okay.
We had 1 location. At one point, we had 4 locations, and then I closed one in South Carolina. So now we have 3.
That's a tough one. You know, that's really a tough decision. There's always that optimism, you know, that hope. Come on, man, we can make it over the hump. We can make it over the hump. And usually about a year later, you're like, man, okay, I've lost a little bit too much here.
Well, and you're right. And, you know, it was open for 10 years, actually going on its 11th year. And when you start something from the ground like that and you get to know the people, you care about the people. And the hardest part is closing it and not always being able to employ everybody else. Not everybody wants to move to Atlanta. So that was a tough decision, but made it in 2007, right before, I'd say, the first major turn down I'd ever been through. And it served us well. It kept us healthy in Atlanta, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, yeah. When did you double that square footage, you know, jump to that much bigger facility? What year was that?
That's been about 19 years ago.
About 19 years ago. And you went from
3,700 to about 88,000.
Yeah. I mean, you got really banged up there. You had a tenant for a little while, didn't you? But then you banged it, you pushed that. Yeah.
They got out and we took up the rest of the space of the building. The biggest thing is back when we were smaller, we actually reached a point, Jason, that I couldn't grow the business. We couldn't grow the business anymore because we couldn't get enough in and get it out fast enough.
Right.
And, you know, so that's when we started the extra branches just for that reason, to give us better service around the city, and then moved to the larger facility. When we moved to the larger facility, Chuck told me, and so did Frank, well, you don't have any more limits now. So they kind of threw it back in my lap.
We sound like the win, man. Took off the shackles, and you better go out and make something happen. Right. So I got to pay for this thing. So yeah. Now, Frank retired about when was that?
About 19 years ago. It's
about 19 years.
Right after we moved in the new building.
Okay. So Frank, left. And then how did that transition go between the two of you? And I guess, you know, were you always kind of slated to take that, or was there some?
I was never, I can say, you know, Jason, I've never went into a job expecting another job. I've just always did the best I could in the one I have. And if you do that, and if you do it well, things will happen to you, good things. You know, if you're in a job that you don't like or you want to move, the worst thing you can do is not do a good job.
Right.
But it just kind of happened. And, you know, of course, Frank was older than me. And, you know, I knew he'd retire one day, but I didn't know what would happen after that. And quite honestly, didn't ask.
Yeah.
And probably about 3 years before he retired, and keep in mind, I'd been there a long time, well over 20 years. They came to me and asked me, would I be willing to fill that role? And of course I said yes. But before he left, what we did was he gradually handed me more and more to where I was doing everything he was doing, plus the job I had. And then when he left, I was up to speed. It wasn't, you know what I mean? And with a smaller company, you can do that kind of stuff.
Definitely so. I mean, and I think that's an interesting thing about those transitions. I've seen some, you know, good ones and bad ones out there, you know, but the ones where somebody puts some thought into it and feeds you certain parts of the company and certain parts of the responsibility, in a reasonable manner, so you have an opportunity to absorb them. I mean, those tend to go really well. And if it's planned, I mean, I've seen some nice transitions. I mean, we're looking at, Kevin Higginbotham and Bill Ward, in the
Right.
Evergreen world, that's an 18-month transition,
Yeah.
so that's a smart transition, in my opinion. It's not like, it's not like this stuff isn't known, it's not like
Right.
it
That's
just like
right.
somebody wakes up,
Right.
and I've seen that too many times where, well, he's going to be out of here in 3 months. We better figure something out. And I'm like, man, you're a year late already,
That's right. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right.
So was there any part, moving from that sales management position to, taking over as president of the organization, was there anything that really was challenging that you just like, man, what, I don't like this part?
Every day. No, really, the toughest part is when you have to do things you don't like to do with employees. And that's by far the hardest part. Now, can I do it? You bet I can. And I've done it many times and probably do it again. But, someone's got to be able to do that. But I learned early on that if you make sure that you've done everything you can to help them grow and support them and given them everything that that they need and they've asked for, and then they still can't. In other words, you throw the ball in their court, help them as long as you can until you realize it's not you, it must be something with them. You just don't jive together. Something there isn't right. Then you've got to move on because it's not fair to everyone working around that person or anyone else in the building. In a small company, everybody has to pull their weight. And if you don't, it shows up pretty quick.
Sure. And then somebody eventually has to say, I'm sorry, this is not working out.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But the good part is to help people and help them get education about your industry and then see them grow and then move to the next. And it's no difference than maybe taking a vendor that's calling on you that wants to learn and grow your business, you helping him, and then he gets promoted. Still a good feeling around those kind of things.
Absolutely. And I think that's an interesting point, Shannon. A lot of folks take this, I don't know if it's an adversarial relationship, but it's a handout type of relationship with their suppliers, that they owe you something. And I think, again, you're talking about supporting them to their next logical conclusion, wherever their next logical step is.
That's right. And if they do what they're supposed to and we support them like we're supposed to, and we live up to our agreements, then we should both be successful.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
That's that partnership. I think the term's probably overused a lot these days.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
if you're a partner with us, you truly are. You come in the building anytime you want. Well, we plan with our partners every year, and I've been doing it for 25 years. And
Right.
part of that is you got to be organized to do it, to handle it. And the number one thing you have to do is you have to inspect what you say you're going to do and what they say they're going to do. And sit down. We do it quarterly and have a review with all of those people. And it's all on a calendar and put in a neat package. So we have all of our sales and marketing plans together by December the 21st every year for the following year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, Shannon, that's one of the more interesting things, and you and I have known each other a long time.
Yep.
And I've watched this, that you are probably one of the most organized people around that particular aspect of the business, is that planning, where most distributors just can't plan their way out of a paper bag. It's just, they fall into stuff. And especially with their relationships with suppliers, they don't know how to manage that relationship. I think you're right. It comes from that organizational standpoint,
Yep.
Let's write some stuff down and then hold each other accountable.
That's right.
I mean, that's really the key.
And Lord knows we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes, but that kind of relationship's no different than a marriage. When you live together that closely, you're both going to mess some things up. But as long as you can sit and work them out, it makes you better on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's funny, going back to your comment about partnership, partnership, as you said, it does get overused quite a bit, but I think sometimes the definition is a little off. It's like, for me, at least, the partnership, and I think this is something you were alluding to earlier, is, when I look at that partner, I'm kind of wanting to make sure that they are along the path they need to go. And if I can keep that in mind, that relationship with that person, then they're going to bring me along that path too.
That's right.
So it's really, I think it's more of a mutual respect for one another and a mutual desire for them to succeed.
That's right.
And it's not, as some have said, that they're lining your pockets or doing something of that nature, or signing on your bank notes or things like that.
Right.
That's not the partnership we're looking for. We're
No.
looking for people that we can honestly, I think, be happy when they succeed, and they will look at us in that same manner, that they will say, we're going to do everything we can to help them succeed as well.
Absolutely. And that's why, when we do have someone that comes in, they're willing to invest some time in us. We're going to invest that much time in them. It's reciprocal. And, the payback is what I said. You help them and support them while they help and support you. They get promoted, and then you make a friend. And of course, after almost 38 years in this business, I got a lot of friends in this industry.
Yeah.
And, some of them are way up the totem pole and have been for 30 years. And that's where really the only thing I've ever asked, or we've ever asked, is help us be better. Help us sell more product. That's all we've ever asked. And I don't think that's too much.
Right. Exactly. I think sometimes people mistake putting their hand out and saying, what can you give me, rather than, how can you help me? That's a very big distinction right there.
You're right. That is a huge distinction.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen it both ways. I mean, I've seen some distributors, and these are, people, again, that you and I would both call friends.
Sure.
But I've seen some of the ways that, I'm like, man, that's just not how, it's just not, first of all, not how you treat people. And second, not how you're going to help your company thrive. It just isn't going to happen that way. So, you and I have both been involved with that manufacturer's rep education.
Yes.
And I think it's, along these same lines, of, again, giving back, and that partnership is really, spending time with them and helping them understand what distribution does for a living and how to spend time and create that long-term relationship going forward.
And that's key.
Yeah. The question is, why did you raise your hand? And why did you say, I want to be a part of that education?
Well, for the same reason, I guess, my whole life. And I've referenced it a couple of times about learning to do things the right way and the wrong way. You get to bond relationships with people then in like businesses. I don't think any two businesses are exactly alike in our industry.
Oh, yeah. I would agree.
But like businesses, and you being able to take some things back, in conversations from them that maybe may help your business, or you may listen and go, nah, I wouldn't do that. So just that exposure to other companies and the way they do things are key, where you get some relationships where you can call somebody 5 states over and go, hey, we're having troubles with this. How are you guys handling that? Or do you have problems with it? It's just another form of resource that you can reach out to, because I don't write a lot of exact books about our business and situations.
Oh, you got that right. I mean, and those who try, it tends to be a little bit of drivel, maybe 25 good words and the rest of it's all a bunch of drivel. So, yeah, egotistical drivel. That's why I'm not a real fan of business books. I just tend to find that, there's only maybe, a couple hundred words that are any good there. And then beyond that, it's just a bunch of egomaniac, spouting off. So I think, though, again, that giving back and, again, creating those professional networks, those serve you a long time. And then the longer you stay in those, you do see people grow. I mean, as you said, you've got friends high on the totem pole, and these are not little companies. These are billion-dollar entities,
right,
where you're still on a first name basis because you invested the time early on with these people.
Sure. And those people become your friends. And if all things are equal, who are you going to do business with? Your friends.
Yeah.
And why do you do that? Because you trust them. If they tell you something, it's going to happen, or it'll happen to the best of their ability. And if they can't do it, they'll call and tell you. All you want's transparency and honesty.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it.
And again, I learned my favorite definition of integrity was from Frank. He was the one that shared with me, just doing the right thing when nobody else is looking.
That's right.
And I think I would absolutely agree. And I think those are the people that we want to do business with, and we want to have those relationships with the long term.
And that's who you open your business to, and you give them a lot of reign. And after as long as we've been doing this, you learn, you do things and you work and they work and they work. And as long as they keep working, you don't need to change it a lot. But you try a lot of things that fail, and you've got to do that. Otherwise, you won't know what works. And you can't be afraid to fail, try something and it not work. You just got to pick it up and throw it again and see what sticks.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, you can't cry in your cornflakes. I mean, it just doesn't, that just isn't going to help you, man.
That's right.
It's just not going to do it. So, it's funny. Speaking of things that, we weren't sure was going to work, years and years ago, you and I were on a panel, or I'm trying to, I think it was in one of those rep education classes that we were teaching. And we got asked, by one of the participants in the audience, what percentage e-commerce would play in our business. And I think both you and I were fairly skeptical about it at the time and said maybe less than 4% or something in that regard. But is that the same today? Or, do you feel like it's got a bigger shot now?
Of course not. It's got a bigger shot. Yeah. And the reason it does is because we've been here longer and it's evolved. At the time, it wasn't evolved as it is now. But certainly I realize the implication and the threat. And as a distributor, what we have to do to keep our customers is we've got to give them every way they can want to purchase from us, whether it's still by fax, whether it's by email, whether it's by EDI, whether it's by online, whether it's by app. You've got to give, because right now, and maybe through time it's happened, I'm just at a different stage the whole time, but I think there's a bigger evolution of older going to younger right now than there's ever been in our industry, at least in and around the city of Atlanta. And so as people come on and they're younger, they grew up with all that technology, while some of the rest of us did not. Yeah. But as it goes on, you got to educate yourself and you got to get a little uncomfortable, and you got to come to realize this is what we need to do just so we can play in the game. If you don't buy the ticket, you can't play. Right. I think there will always be a need for people of our industry, and especially in larger markets, for job sites that need things, that can't wait, that want to talk to somebody. But I think when it comes to an organized, structured business, a big contractor that does 80% of their purchasing inside an office, you've got to be able to appeal to that guy too, just not the guy on the job. You're right. It is definitely a multifaceted approach. And you really, from an organizational standpoint, need those different strategies. I don't care if they want to send it telepathically, somehow we're going to have to receive that message. We got to figure out, how do I receive that message in there? And how do I get them served? Yeah, it's interesting, because I see companies that believe that it's going to shift to 75% online versus 25. And I'm like, I don't know if I believe in those absolutes, and I don't believe, I think that every piece or every channel that you're going to receive that customer order, you're going to have to really make space for 5 or 6 different methods, where we kind of thought 1 or 2 was really about what we were doing before. That's correct. And that's appealing to all those different types that you have to be able to do. And I'm like you. Do I think it's ever going to be, in our industry, 70%? I don't think so, but I didn't think it'd be what it is today 20 years ago either. Yeah, and I think that pandemic was really the big catalyst, for a lot of people. They went from that maybe 4%, 4-ish, and it yanked it up there quite a bit. It just pushed the issue for us. You're right. And it made you realize a lot of things. We were lucky enough to stay open and work every day. We didn't have to close. We didn't have to do anything except what we had been doing, but we had to adjust a lot during that time period. Yeah, definitely a lot of adjustment time. But, I think, Shannon, one of the things I love about privately held small business is very nimble. We can adapt quickly, man. And I think even just you and I looking over this computer screen at each other and have a conversation, that wasn't really as attainable a couple, 3 years ago. We just didn't feel comfortable with that. That's right. And today it's just what it is, and we have adapted, and we're going. We're not going to miss a beat. We're not going to miss a dollar if we can. Well, like I said, hunger will drive you to do a lot of things. Yes, it will, my friend. Yes, it will. And it's interesting. You were alluding to the younger kind of driving the older to adapt and change. I was talking to Kathy Newton. I don't know if you've ever met Kathy. She was a dean at Purdue. But she talks a lot about generational differences. And she said that now that millennial generation has now taken over as the largest generation. The boomers are out far enough, and of course the Gen Xers, we get skipped over on everything. We just get staffed on everything. But those millennials just jumped over and took over. But they are definitely the largest population.
So I would agree that that is actually driving some of the innovation and the changes that we see in our companies.
Sure. Because
So
you got to appeal to those people to want to work for you.
yeah,
And if you're still scribbling on a stone tablet, they have no interest in that.
no, they do not. They do not. And trust me, there are many of us that like to go back to it, but maybe not. We can't get away with that, at least this year. So I wanted to touch on something. You talked about the transition between Frank, and you referenced Chuck a few times.
Yeah,
You're the president of Dixie, but Chuck is still the owner of that company.
that's correct. He owns the company. And,
Yeah.
Chuck did what I probably would think would be the hardest thing a business owner could do, and keep his nose out of the business to find out if he's got the right person there, is that's let him run the business. And
Yeah.
Chuck did that with Frank.
He's done it twice.
He let Frank run the business and trusted him to do so. And me and Steve Simony, I consider Steve my partner, is because we've been there together the longest. And he entrusted us to run his business. Man, he never sticks his nose in. He never meddles, but he may come in and ask some questions. He gets a P&L, and usually I talk to him about once a month.
Gotcha.
If I'm lucky, I see him once a month, but he doesn't come in that often. I always enjoy seeing him because Chuck's a very good teacher also. So from that aspect, we've been very lucky. I've been lucky to work for someone like Chuck Tack.
Yeah. I would agree. I just always looked at that situation. I remember years and years ago, I met a guy. This is when I left the company and started in the consulting side, and I was at a conference. And I had met the president of an electrical supply company, and he said, well, I don't own it. The shareholders own it. The family owns it. But,
Right.
I'm the president of the organization. And I always went, that's an interesting dynamic. And then, again, with your situation, again, it's a very interesting dynamic to go through.
And Chuck's position, he's CEO, and we have his grandson in the business now who we've been teaching for the last several years. And eventually, and let me say now, he's very capable. So that's not an issue here, and he will do a good job. But there's no substitute for time and experience. You can't make it happen faster. You just got to experience it. And so we're giving him the experience he needs so that transition should be seamless also.
And I think it's honestly, Shannon, it's a testament to you to not feel threatened by that, and to feel like this is your responsibility. And I think that's pretty amazing, because again, just like Chuck, it's a pretty rare thing to be able to give up that control and let somebody else run your business.
It's the hardest thing in the world.
But I also think it's a pretty amazing thing for you to be able to recognize that this is my responsibility, is to get him ready for that transition, that next step. So,
well, I told Chuck, I said, when I get ready to leave, I'll feel like the company's in the best position it's ever been in, and he will be ready to do it. And that was my word to him when Tanner first started with us, which has been about 8 years ago now.
About 8 years. Yeah.
Now, I don't plan on retiring anytime soon.
No, I'm looking at you, man, and I'm like, no. I mean, look, you and I have both got a couple more years in the taking,
Oh, yeah. Well, I still enjoy it. I still enjoy the space.
Yeah, it is. And it's been a good run. There's a lot of interesting things, ups and downs throughout the thing. But no, I think it's really, it's kind of a fascinating journey, and we talk about, how distribution's a really great place to work. It's a great place to build a career based on your merits. If you're willing to put in the effort, there are some really great things that can happen to you.
Oh, absolutely. And our business, our industry strives for people that want to sacrifice enough to do that. It's just tough. Well, everybody has problems finding people, but of all the challenges in the last 38 years, I've had a few. Economy, now pandemic. Back in the 80s, not long after I started, the interest rates jumped up. And I remember when they absolutely walked off some John Portman jobs here in Atlanta, which were 60-story buildings, walked off the jobs because the interest rate was so high, he couldn't make money anymore. And they stayed, no one working in them for about 2 weeks till the banks came to the table and they renegotiated everything. And, that's right now, we're doing amazingly better than I think probably, we should, with inflation the way it is, with, the shortages in materials. And I think as long as that interest rate doesn't jump too much, it's probably we're going to adapt, and we'll find out what the new normal is whenever we get out of this thing. And
Yeah.
I'm hoping that'll
Yeah.
be by the end of first quarter next year, but we just have to wait and see.
Absolutely. I mean, boy, it's just, I think it just amazes me. You never know what the barrier is going to be. Because right now, if you had all the stuff you needed, I mean, it would just be wagons west. I
Yeah,
mean,
it
you guys
would.
could you'd just be, running and gunning and running 3 shifts of people throwing inventory everywhere you could put it. But yeah, it's just, it's one thing or another, Shannon. It's so funny over the years, we've seen these ups and downs. It's just, there's just that one little piece that's just not falling into place the way it's supposed to.
Well, we always have those short periods where everything works really good and you're going, wow. And you start looking over your shoulder going, what's
right. That's right. When's that next shoe going to drop? So, well, I definitely wish you all continued success, man, because it's been it's been a good ride. And I agree. I think that you're going to see something, shake out here in the next 6 to 9 months.
Right.
You'll find out where you're at. Well, hey, man, it's always a pleasure catching up with you. And I really appreciate you taking the time to chat a little bit about you and your journey.
Always take time for a friend, Jason.
All right. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. And I look forward to chatting with you soon.
Okay, bud. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.